In this tutorial, I'll show you how to make a professional sponge cake that can be used for cake layers, like this strawberry shortcake, as a base for Swiss rolls, for delicate cupcakes, and Italian rum-soaked pastries and cakes. I'm Kat, and welcome to my channel. A recap of the components of a sponge cake from my previous tutorial. We're going to be using both eggs and egg whites without separating them. Instead of butter, I'm using oil for a lighter, moister cake with a longer shelf life. Instead of all-purpose flour, I'm using cake and pastry flour in addition to cornstarch to make it even more delicate. I'm going to omit the baking powder as it will rise with a special technique which I will show you. You can use any type of pan for this cake. For this recipe, I'm using a 9-inch round cake pan that's 3 inches tall. This can then be split in half to make a layered cake that you can fill with whipped cream, jams, or any light filling. I wouldn't reuse a sponge cake for buttercream fillings unless it's an Italian meringue buttercream. That will be for my next tutorial. There's only 7 ingredients in this recipe. I'm using only weighted amounts as this is a professional recipe and pros don't use measuring cups. I highly recommend purchasing a small scale that you can find almost anywhere for about $25 or even less. Always start by preheating your oven for at least 10 minutes. Sift together the flour and cornstarch in a medium bowl to remove any lumps. Over a pot of simmering water, place the eggs, sugar, and salt in your mixing bowl that you'll later attach to your stand mixer. I don't recommend using a handheld mixer for this recipe as it will take about 20 minutes of continuous mixing. Continue whisking until the temperature reaches 120 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm using an infrared thermometer that I'll post in the link below, or you can use a candy thermometer. Then place a bowl on your stand mixer and start mixing at a high speed. It will take about 15 to 20 minutes of continuous mixing for this step. The mixture will be thick and pale and will look like cream or a yellowish meringue. This is also the base to making French meringue buttercream. Continue mixing until slightly warm, just above room temperature. Slowly add in the oil in a steady stream. Then lower the speed and add the vanilla so that it doesn't splash around. Continue mixing until well incorporated and cool to room temperature. Add the flour a little at a time and fold it in gently so not to collapse the meringue. Since there's no baking powder in this recipe, it's the air incorporated in the meringue that will cause the cake to rise with the heat. Place a piece of parchment paper on the bottom of your pan and grease the sides. I use cake goop that I've made and I'll post the recipe below. Slowly add the batter and spread evenly. If you see any flour, just mix it in. Make sure you get every little bit out of your bowl. Cool the cake on a wire rack for half an hour, then run an offset spatula around the rim to release. Invert the cake over, then gently pull off the parchment paper. The bottom of the cake ends up being the top of your cake. Cool the cake completely before serving. I've got some extra crumbs because I didn't wait too long. To avoid crumbs, you can chill the cake before cutting for a few hours in the fridge, or you can wrap in plastic wrap and freeze up to 3 months. Taste test time. This cake is very light and spongy with a delicate vanilla flavor. I would pair it with light creams, jams, or an Italian meringue buttercream, but nothing too sweet. You can see how spongy it is when I dab at it. This sponge cake is a perfect base cake to use for layered cakes and rum soaked cakes, as it will absorb well. It can also be used as a base for Swiss rolls, as it won't rip when rolling. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and we'll be back next week to show you how to make Italian meringue buttercream that you can use to decorate your sponge. Happy baking!